And the guy who accurately predicted how bad it was going to be has the nickname Dr. Doom. When the history of the Obama presidency is written, and not the gossipy anonymous he said, she said, invented dialogue chapbooks that passes journalistic history now, but the actual history, when the long-term history of this presidency is written, the defining issue, the defining context will be how he started. The massive financial crisis that was still exploding when this new president took over. The Dr. Doom who predicted the housing collapse and the financial crisis and us almost having a second Great Depression, all before it happened, is Nouriel Roubini. After being coronated as the guy who got it right because of that foresight, Professor Roubini gave an interview in the summer of last year that honestly, when I read it, improved my mood for months. Despite the whole Dr. Doom thing, he was generally positive about the way we were coming out of the crisis, and in particular about the way that Tim Geithner and the rest of the president's economic team were understanding and responding to the problem. That was last summer. Now, a little bit more than a year later, he's back to doom. Professor Roubini telling the New York Times this month that we are staring down the barrel right now of another housing collapse, another $1 trillion in housing losses. He said, quote, "The real estate market, for sure, is double dipping." Remember what happened to the rest of the economy after the first dip, after the first housing dip? Now we are having a second one? Are things about to go south again, hard and fast? And if so, does anything else in politics matter? Why even bother tracking legislation and polls and candidates up and down if all of that will be rendered moot in the next presidential election? Because I don't care if you're Tom Brady and the vote is for who should be Patriots quarterback. I don't care if you're cauliflower and the vote is for palest cruciferous vegetable. I don't care if you are snow and the election is for what's cold. If the economy goes south again, it does not matter what else happens in politics. No one gets reelected to anything if unemployment is at 15%. Joining us now is Nouriel Roubini, chairman and co-founder of Roubini Global Economics and professor of economics at NYU's Stern School of Business. Dr. Roubini, thank you so much.
Glad to be here.
Are you bummed out by people with the Dr. Doom thing? Do you feel like you have to put on a sunny visage to counteract that?
No, I'm just myself.
Okay, fair enough. It's very scary to see you. That's the way I think about you. How sick are we still? Can you diagnose the state of the recovery sort of post-financial crisis?
Well, I would say there are some good news and there are some bad news. The good news is the recession is over. There is an economic recovery. Next year, growth might be around 3%, so it's a sustaining recovery. But there are several downside risks. The first one is that in spite of growth, firms are not hiring. Unemployment rate is still 10% almost, including discouraged workers and partially employed is 17%. So firms have found ways of producing more by having less workers. So this growth is not leading to reduction in unemployment rate. This is becoming a yearly issue. Second issue is that the housing market is double dipping. Quantities are falling, home prices are falling again. We artificially stimulated demand for a few months through this tax credit. As soon as expired, home sales collapse again. Third problem is that state and local governments are semi-bankrupt. You know, Europe has Greece and Ireland. In the US we have Arizona, Nevada, Florida, California, Illinois, even New York is in trouble. So there's a risk the state and local governments have a squeeze, fiscal problems. And then at the federal level, we're kicking the can down the road. You know, we have just passed this tax stimulus that's going to add another $900 billion to the deficit over the next 2 years. So things are improving, but there are also a number of downside risks.
On the issue of how best to respond, one thing that I don't understand about the way a number of countries are responding, and I think some states are sort of moving in this direction too, is the idea that the way out of this mess is through austerity, by dialing back quite sharply on spending. I understand why that helps with debt and why that's therefore important, but doesn't that also completely choke off the possibility of any economic growth?
It does. The difficult trade-off that most countries are facing are that huge budget deficits, their stock of public debt is rising, but the recovery is still anemic. So in the short run, you need a stimulus because private demand is not recovered. But if you keep on running large deficits forever, eventually you might end up with a train wreck, like in Ireland, like in Greece. To me, the way to square this circle is by having a short-term stimulus, because the economy is still recovering in a weak way, demand is not strong, but then commit today to raising taxes not today but over in the future gradually, and committing today about cutting some forms of spending over time. But you backload all that spending cuts and increases in the revenues, and you maintain a stimulus in the short run. So if you can credibly commit to have some light at the end of a tunnel with discipline over the next 5-10 years, and you need a stimulus in the short run, the bond market vigilantes are not going to wake up and punish you. But right now in the U.S., I think we're doing the short-term stimulus, but it's misdirected. A lot of it is going to people who don't need it, like the very rich. And we're not doing anything about the medium-term fiscal. So it's a bit of a mess.
We have to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the political realities, about what you think might be the best thing to do and whether those things are going to be more or less politically possible with the new Congress. Thank you for being with us, Professor Rubini. We'll have more with my special guest, Nouriel Roubini, next. We are live at the 92nd Street Y here in New York City. Please stay with us.